Jake Morrison sat in the hard plastic chair and stared at the white walls of the briefing room. The coffee in his cup had gone cold an hour ago, but he kept sipping it anyway. 15 years with the Chicago Police Department had taught him that waiting was part of the job, but this felt different. The Galactic Integration Unit headquarters looked nothing like any police station he had ever seen. Everything was too clean and too quiet. The door opened with a soft hiss and Commander Lisa Hayes walked in. She carried a thick folder and wore the kind of serious expression that meant someone was about to get bad news. Jake had seen that look before on the faces of captains and chiefs when they were about to assign him to cases nobody else wanted. "Detective Morrison," Hayes said as she sat down across from him. "I know you have questions about why you were transferred here." Jake nodded. 3 days ago he had been working robbery cases in downtown Chicago. Then a woman in a black suit had shown up at his desk with transfer papers signed by people he had never heard of. The orders came from so high up the chain that his captain just shrugged and told him to pack his things. "The year 2157 changed everything," Hayes continued. "First contact with alien species meant we needed new ways of handling law enforcement. Crime doesn't stop at planetary boundaries anymore. We need officers who can work with non-human partners." She opened the folder and pulled out a photograph. It showed a tall figure with blue scaled skin and 4 arms. The creature stood next to a human for scale, and Jake could see it was at least 7 feet tall. Its face was angular but somehow familiar, like looking at a statue of a warrior goddess. "Her name is Zara, but she goes by Zara," Hayes said. "She's from the Catherian Empire. They're a warrior species that evolved on a high-gravity world. Their reflexes are faster than ours, and their tactical abilities make our best special forces look like children playing soldier." Jake studied the photo. The alien's eyes were large and silver, with no visible pupils. Her skin had an almost metallic quality that reflected light in strange ways. She wore what looked like body armor, but it seemed to be made of the same material as her skin. "Why me?" Jake asked. "I'm just a regular detective. I've never worked with aliens before." Hayes smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "That's exactly why we want you. The officers who think they know everything about combat and tactics wash out in the first week. We need someone who can learn and adapt." She pulled out another sheet of paper covered in official stamps and signatures. "Your first case involves smugglers using modified cargo ships to transport illegal weapons through the asteroid belt. It might sound simple, but nothing is simple when you're dealing with technology from 6 different species." Jake looked at the mission briefing. Most of the words were familiar, but the context made no sense. Plasma rifles, quantum storage devices, and neural interface weapons were listed like they were everyday items instead of science fiction dreams. "There's something else you need to know," Hayes said. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "When I say trust her with your life, I mean it literally. Catherians don't understand the concept of acceptable losses. If she decides you're worth protecting, she die before letting harm come to you. But if she decides you're not worth the effort." She left the sentence hanging in the air. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. What happened to her previous partners? 3 transfers in 6 months. The first one couldn't handle her fighting style, said it was too violent. The second one thought he could order her around like a junior officer. The third one made the mistake of questioning her judgment in front of other aliens. Hayes stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Jake could see the landing platforms where ships from across the solar system came and went. Some of them looked almost human in design, while others resembled nothing he had ever imagined. "The thing about Catherians," Hayes said without turning around, "is that they evaluate everything in terms of survival value, food, shelter, weapons, allies. If you prove you have survival value, you'll never have a more loyal partner." "If you done single quotes ... She didn't need to finish. Jake understood. He was about to be judged by standards he didn't understand by a being who could kill him without breaking a sweat. "When do I meet her?" he asked. "She's waiting in docking bay 7. Your transport leaves in 2 hours. Hayes handed him a small device that looked like a cross between a phone and a scanner. This is a universal translator. It handles most known languages, but Cytherians sometimes use concepts that don't translate well. Just remember that everything she says have a purpose. Jake stood up and straightened his jacket. The weight of his service weapon felt reassuring against his hip, even though he suspected it would be useless against most of the threats he was about to face. "One more thing," Hayes said as he reached the door. "Don't try to impress her with human bravery or heroics. Cytherians respect competence and survival instinct. Show her you can think under pressure and follow orders when it matters." The walk to Docking Bay 7 took 10 minutes through corridors filled with beings from across the galaxy. Jake saw creatures with tentacles instead of arms, others with crystalline skin that rang like bells when they moved, and some that seemed to be made of living metal. None of them paid him any attention, but he felt like he was walking through a dream. Docking Bay 7 was larger than most airplane hangars. In the center sat a sleek black ship that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of stone. Next to it stood the alien from the photograph. Zara was even more impressive in person. Her four arms moved independently as she checked equipment and loaded supplies. Each movement was precise and economical, like she was performing a carefully choreographed dance. When she turned to look at him, Jake felt like he was being measured by a predator deciding whether he was prey or competition. "Human Jake," she said. Her voice had a musical quality that made his name sound like a song. "Your species approaches danger with curious recklessness. This trait is noted as potentially valuable." Jake wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a warning. He decided to treat it as both. "Ready to go?" he asked. Zara tilted her head in what might have been amusement. "We shall discover if you are ready, human Jake. The stars do not forgive weakness." As they boarded the ship, Jake realized his old life was over. Whatever happened next would determine not just his survival, but his worth in a universe much larger and more dangerous than anything he had imagined. The ship was nothing like Jake had expected. Instead of buttons and switches, the control panels responded to touch and seemed to know what Zara wanted before she asked. The walls glowed with a soft blue light that pulsed in rhythm with the engines. Jake strapped himself into a seat that adjusted to his body shape automatically. "The journey to Europa Station will take 6 hours, Zara said as she moved through the startup sequence. Her four arms worked independently, checking systems and preparing for launch. "We will use this time to discuss the mission parameters and your capabilities." Jake watched the Earth shrink below them as they accelerated toward the outer solar system. The view was beautiful but also terrifying. He was farther from home than any human had been just 50 years ago. "Tell me about these smugglers," he said. Zara activated a holographic display that showed a three-dimensional map of the asteroid belt. Red dots marked the locations where illegal weapons had been detected. "They are using modified cargo ships to transport items that violate 17 different galactic treaties. The weapons they carry could destabilize the peace between Earth and the Galactic Council." The display zoomed in on one of the red dots. Jake could see a detailed image of a cargo ship that looked like it had been built by combining parts from different species. Sections of the hull were clearly human in design, while other parts used alien technology. "The pattern suggests they are not random criminals," Zara continued. "Someone with knowledge of both human and alien systems is coordinating these operations. This level of organization requires resources and connections that go beyond simple profit motivation." Jake studied the images. His experience with organized crime in Chicago had taught him to look for patterns that others missed. "They're testing something," he said. "Look at the timing of these shipments. They're not trying to maximize profits or minimize risks. They're trying to see how we respond." Zara's silver eyes focused on him with new interest. "Explain this assessment." "If I wanted to move illegal weapons for money, I would space out the shipments and use different routes each time. But these guys are hitting the same areas repeatedly and increasing the frequency. They want to be noticed. They want to see how fast we can respond and what methods we use." For the first time since they met, Zara seemed impressed. "Your species has a talent for seeing patterns in chaos?" This is why the Galactic Council finds humans useful despite your technological limitations. Jake wasn't sure if that was a compliment or an insult. He decided to focus on the mission. So what's the plan when we reach Europa Station? Intelligence reports indicate a weapons cache in Warehouse Section 7. We will conduct surveillance and then execute a coordinated assault to capture the smugglers and their cargo. The next few hours passed in relative silence. Jake tried to read the mission briefings, but most of the technical specifications made no sense to him. Plasma rifles had power ratings measured in units he had never heard of. Quantum storage devices could apparently hold objects in a state of suspended reality. Neural interface weapons could take control of a person's mind. Europa Station appeared on the view screen as they approached. The mining colony looked like a collection of metal bubbles connected by tubes and bridges. It orbited the ice moon Europa, harvesting water and minerals for the growing human population in the outer solar system. Many humans on Europa feel abandoned by Earth's government, Zara said as they docked. This creates conditions favorable for criminal recruitment. Desperate people make poor decisions when offered easy money. Jake nodded. He had seen the same pattern in Chicago. Poverty and hopelessness made people vulnerable to criminals who promised quick solutions to their problems. The docking bay was crowded with workers and travelers from across the solar system. Jake saw humans in mining suits standing next to aliens he couldn't identify. The air smelled of metal and ozone with an underlying scent of recycled atmosphere. "Stay close," Zara said. "Your weapon will be ineffective against most of the threats we might encounter here. If violence occurs, follow my lead and do not attempt heroics." They made their way through the station's corridors toward the warehouse district. Jake noticed how other beings reacted to Zara's presence. Some stepped aside respectfully while others watched her with obvious fear. A few aliens nodded to her in what seemed like professional acknowledgement. Warehouse Section 7 was in the older part of the station, where the lighting was dimmer and the air recycling systems worked less efficiently. Jake could hear the distant hum of machinery and the occasional clang of metal on metal. "The target warehouse is 3 buildings ahead," Zara whispered. "Scanning indicates 12 life forms inside and energy signatures consistent with illegal weapon storage." Jake peered around the corner of a shipping container. The warehouse looked ordinary from the outside, but he could see guards posted at the entrances. They were human, but something about their movement patterns seemed wrong. "Those guards," he said. "They're moving too fast and too precisely. Like they're all following the same choreographed routine?" Zara's expression grew serious. "Your observation is correct. Those are not normal humans. They have been modified with stolen Zephyrian neural implants. Their consciousness is networked to share tactical information instantaneously." Jake felt his blood run cold. "You mean they think and act as one unit?" "Precisely. They can predict your movements before you make them because they process information at superhuman speeds. This complicates our mission significantly." Before Jake could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the warehouse district. Emergency lights bathed everything in red. The modified humans at the warehouse entrances turned toward their hiding spot with mechanical precision. "We have been detected," Zara said. "Prepare for combat." Jake drew his weapon, but he knew it would be useless against enemies who could anticipate his every move. The modified humans were already moving toward their position within human coordination. "Stay behind me," Zara ordered. "I will handle the enhanced humans. You focus on finding alternate routes and watching for additional threats." The first modified human rounded the corner at a speed that made Jake's eyes water. It moved like a blur of motion and raised a weapon that hummed with alien energy. Jake started to aim his pistol but realized he was far too slow. Then Zara exploded into motion. Her 4 arms worked in perfect coordination as she engaged multiple enemies simultaneously. 2 arms handled weapons while the other 2 managed defensive shields and tactical equipment. She didn't just fight the enhanced humans. She danced around them with lethal grace. Jake watched in amazement as his partner turned the modified human's greatest advantage into a weakness. She fed false information into their networked consciousness by creating multiple false targets and phantom movements. The enhanced humans began attacking shadows and empty air while Zara systematically disabled them one by one. "Human Jake," Zara called out as she finished subduing the last modified human. "Your species fights with heart while Catherians fight with mind. Together we are formidable. This partnership shows promise." Jake looked at the defeated enemies scattered around them. His partner had just accomplished something that would have required an entire SWAT team back on Earth, but something in her silver eyes suggested she was still evaluating him, still deciding whether he was worth keeping alive. The warehouse was filled with crates that hummed with alien energy. Jake followed Zara through the rows of containers while she scanned each one with a device that looked like a cross between a flashlight and a medical scanner. The air tasted metallic and made his teeth ache. "These weapons are not random stolen goods," Zara said as she examined the readings. "Someone has been collecting specific types of alien technology. Plasma rifles from the Andromedans, neural disruptors from the Zephyrians, and quantum destabilizers from the hegemony." Jake looked at the crates with growing unease. Each container was labeled with symbols he couldn't read, but the energy signatures made his skin crawl. What would someone need with all these different weapons? The combination suggests preparation for conflict with multiple species simultaneously, Zara replied. "This is not smuggling for profit. This is preparation for war." They continued deeper into the warehouse until they reached a section that had been converted into a makeshift command center. Computer screens showed star charts and shipping routes throughout the solar system. Jake recognized some of the locations from his briefing materials. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a screen that displayed a timeline. "These shipments have been building up for months. Someone has been planning this operation for a long time." Zara studied the data with her four arms working at different keyboards simultaneously. The pattern indicates coordination between human criminals and alien separatist groups. This level of cooperation should be impossible given the cultural barriers between species. Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's climate control, unless someone found a way to bridge those barriers. Before Zara could respond, a new voice spoke from the shadows behind them. Very perceptive Detective Morrison. They turned to see a human woman in her 40s with graying hair and intelligent eyes. She wore a lab coat over civilian clothes and carried herself with the confidence of someone used to being the smartest person in the room. "Dr. Elizabeth Cain," Zara said, her voice carrying a note of surprise. "You were reported dead in a research accident 3 years ago." Cain smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Death is a useful cover story when you need to disappear from official records. It gives you the freedom to pursue research that governments and galactic councils would never approve. Jake kept his hand near his weapon but didn't draw it. Cain didn't seem armed, but something about her calm demeanor in the face of 2 law enforcement officers made him nervous. "What kind of research?" he asked. "The kind that asks difficult questions about humanity's place in the galaxy," Cain replied. "Questions like why every other species follows predictable patterns while humans constantly surprise everyone. Questions about what makes humans so useful to the Galactic Council that they overlook your technological limitations." She gestured toward the screens around them. "I've been studying human behavior patterns for the hegemony. They needed to understand why humans can form partnerships with species that have been enemies for centuries. Why humans can adapt to alien cultures while maintaining their own identity." Zara's stance shifted slightly and Jake recognized the change as a preparation for combat. "You have been conducting illegal research on human subjects." "I've been trying to save humanity from itself," Cain said. "Do you know what the Galactic Council really thinks of humans? They see you as useful tools. Your ability to bridge differences between incompatible species makes you valuable mediators and negotiators. But tools can be discarded when they're no longer needed." Jake felt his anger rising. "So you decided to work with enemies of humanity instead?" "I decided to work with beings who understand that humans are the wild card in galactic politics," Cain replied. Every other species can be predicted and controlled, but humans adapt and improvise and form emotional bonds that transcend logic. The hegemony wants to study these traits so they can counter them. The warehouse suddenly filled with the sound of approaching footsteps. Jake counted at least a dozen sets of boots moving in perfect synchronization. More modified humans were surrounding the building. "Your research ends here," Zara said as she drew her weapons. Cain shook her head. "My research is just beginning. You see, Detective Morrison, you and your partner represent the perfect test subjects. A human who can think beyond normal parameters paired with an alien who has learned to value individual sacrifice over mission success." Jake looked at Zara with confusion. "What does she mean?" "Catherians are trained from birth to prioritize mission completion over personal attachments," Cain explained. "But your partner has been showing signs of behavioral modification since working with human officers. She's learning to care about individual lives in ways that go against her species." "Programming." Zara's silver eyes narrowed. "My tactical decisions are based on optimal outcomes for mission success." "Then why did you risk yourself to save Detective Morrison during the fight outside?" Cain asked. "Standard Catherian protocol would have been to complete the mission and report his loss as acceptable casualties." Jake realized with growing alarm that Cain was right. Zara had protected him when a purely logical approach would have been to let him die and continue the mission alone. The thought bothered him more than he expected. "This is why humans are feared throughout the galaxy," Cain continued. "You make others care about things beyond duty and logic. You corrupt the programming of every species you encounter. This is either evolution or it's a form of madness." The footsteps outside stopped. Jake could hear the modified humans taking positions around the warehouse. They were trapped with no obvious escape route. "Your test subjects are about to face their first real challenge," Cain said as she backed toward a door marked with alien symbols. "The building security systems have been designed specifically to separate human-alien partnerships. They use psychological warfare to break the bonds between different species." Emergency lighting activated throughout the warehouse. The red glow made everything look like it was covered in blood. Jake heard the sound of heavy doors sliding shut and locking. "The maze will test everything you think you know about each other," Cain called out as she disappeared through the marked door. "Most partnerships don't survive the first hour." The warehouse floor began to shift and change. Walls rose from hidden panels while others sank into the ground. Jake found himself separated from Zara by a barrier that seemed to be made of solid light. "Human Jake?" Zara's voice came through the barrier, but it sounded distorted and distant. "The systems are designed to trigger species-specific psychological responses. Do not trust what you see or hear." Jake pressed his hand against the light barrier. It felt warm and seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. Around him, the warehouse was transforming into something that looked like a funhouse mirror version of the Chicago streets where he had grown up. "I can handle whatever this thing throws at me," he called back, but as holographic images of his childhood fears began to materialize around him, Jake realized he might have spoken too soon. The maze wasn't just testing his partnership with Zara, it was testing everything he thought he knew about himself. The holographic Chicago streets felt real under Jake's feet. He could smell the hot dogs from the vendor cart on the corner and hear the familiar sound of traffic in the distance. But something was wrong with the shadows. They moved independently of the objects that cast them and seemed to be watching him with invisible eyes. "This is not real," Jake said aloud, trying to convince himself as much as the maze. "These are just projections designed to mess with my head." A figure stepped out from behind a lamppost. It was Jake's father, looking exactly as he had the day. He walked out when Jake was 12 years old, the man who had promised to come back but never did. "You always were a disappointment," his father said with the same cold voice Jake remembered from his childhood. "Now you're playing space cop with monsters. Do you think that makes you special?" Jake closed his eyes and tried to block out the image. "You're dead. You died 5 years ago without ever coming back. This isn't real." "Nothing you do matters," the projection continued. Your alien partner is just using you. The moment you become inconvenient, she throw you away like garbage. That's what everyone does to you eventually? The streets around Jake began to shift and change. Now he was standing in his childhood bedroom, looking at the small bed where he had waited night after night for his father to come home. The room smelled of his mother's cigarettes and the disappointment that had filled their house for years. Meanwhile, Zara found herself in a different kind of nightmare. The maze had created a perfect replica of her homeworld during the Great Invasion. The sky was the color of blood and the ground was covered with the bodies of her people. She walked through the battlefield where she had lost her first combat unit. "Commander Zarathik," a voice called out. She turned to see Captain Vextar, her former superior officer who had died protecting their city. "You have dishonored our species by caring for a weak human." Zara's forearms trembled with suppressed emotion. "My tactical decisions are sound. The human has proven useful in unexpected ways." "Useful?" Captain Vextar's image laughed bitterly. "You risk mission failure to protect a being who cannot even survive in standard gravity. You have become infected with human weakness." The battlefield around them filled with the sounds of dying Catherians. Zara could hear the screams of her people as they fell to enemy weapons. She had been trained from birth to suppress emotional responses, but the maze was attacking her at a level deeper than training. "Your people died because you were not strong enough to save them," another voice said. This time it was her mother, the great warrior Calathik. "Now you repeat the same weakness with this human. You will fail him as you failed us." Back in his section of the maze, Jake was facing his own demons. The projection of his father had been replaced by images of every person he had failed to save during his years as a police officer. Victims of crimes he had solved too late, witnesses who had died before he could protect them, innocent people hurt because he had made the wrong choice. "You're not a real cop," said the ghost of Maria Santos, a young mother who had been killed during a robbery Jake had failed to prevent. "You're just a man with a gun who pretends to help people. Now you're going to get your alien partner killed too." Jake felt the weight of 15 years of guilt and failure crushing down on him. Every mistake, every moment of doubt, every person he couldn't save seemed to be standing in the holographic street staring at him with accusing eyes. "She's going to die because of you," Maria's ghost continued, "just like I did. Just like all the others, you're poison to everyone who trusts you." The maze was designed to break partnerships by making each person believe they were worthless to their teammate. Jake understood this on an intellectual level, but the emotional assault was harder to resist than he had expected through the barrier that separated them. He could hear Zara's voice, but it sounded distant and distorted. "Human Jake, the psychological attacks are intensifying. You must resist the false narratives." "I'm trying," Jake called back. "But it's hard to ignore when the voices are telling you things you already believe about yourself." The maze seemed to respond to his admission by intensifying the assault. Now he was surrounded by every person who had ever called him worthless, every moment when he had felt like a failure, every time he had wondered if he was good enough to be a cop. But as the projections closed in around him, Jake heard something that cut through the noise. It was Zara's voice, but not distorted by the maze's interference. She was singing something in her native language, a low harmonic sound that seemed to resonate in his bones. "The Song of Partnership," she called out. "It is sung by Catherian warriors who fight beside trusted allies. I sing it for you, human Jake." Jake realized with surprise that Zara was deliberately violating Catherian protocol by showing emotional attachment to him. Her song was an act of defiance against her own species' traditions. "Why?" he shouted through the barrier. "Why would you risk dishonoring yourself for me?" "Because you have shown me that survival is not the only value worth fighting for," Zara replied. "Your species taught me that some things are worth dying for. This partnership is one of them." The maze responded to their connection by increasing the psychological pressure. Jake found himself surrounded by images of every fear and insecurity he had ever experienced. But now he had something to fight for beyond just his own survival. "You're wrong," he said to the projection of his father. I'm good enough, I've saved people, and I've made a difference. And I'm not going to let anything happen to my partner. The holographic images began to flicker and fade as Jake's resolve strengthened. He pressed his hand against the light barrier and felt it beginning to weaken. "Zara," he called out, "I don't care what your people's traditions say. You're not just a tactical asset to me. You're my partner, and I'm going to get us out of this." The barrier dissolved as their partnership proved stronger than the maze's psychological warfare. Jake and Zara found themselves standing together in the center of the warehouse, surrounded by the wreckage of the failed test. The maze was designed to break us apart, Zara said, but human emotional bonds are stronger than the hegemony anticipated. Jake looked at his partner with new respect. "You risked everything to save me. That goes against everything your species believes." "Perhaps," Zara replied. "Or perhaps my species has something to learn from yours. Either way, we have a mission to complete." They could hear Cain's voice over the warehouse's communication system. "Fascinating. The partnership survived the first test. Let's see how it handles the second one." Jake drew his weapon as armed figures began emerging from the shadows around them. This time they would face the threat together. The armed figures that emerged from the shadows were unlike anything Jake had seen before. They moved with the mechanical precision of the modified humans, but their equipment was clearly alien in design. Each one carried weapons that hummed with different types of energy, and their body armor seemed to shift and adapt to their movements. "Hegemony assault troops," Zara said as she raised her own weapons. "They are equipped with technology specifically designed to counter human-alien partnerships." Jake counted 12 enemies surrounding them in a perfect circle. Their movements were coordinated but not networked like the modified humans they had fought earlier. These were professional soldiers who had trained together for years. "What makes them so dangerous?" Jake asked while keeping his weapon trained on the nearest enemy. "They study partnership tactics and develop countermeasures," Zara replied. "They know how to exploit the weaknesses that come from caring about your teammates' survival." The lead assault trooper stepped forward and removed his helmet. Jake was surprised to see a human face underneath, but the man's eyes had been replaced with mechanical implants that glowed with red light. "Detective Morrison," the cyborg said in a voice that sounded like it came from a computer. "Dr. Cain wants to see how far you will go to protect your alien partner. This is the real test." Before Jake could respond, the assault troops began their attack. But instead of trying to kill both partners simultaneously, they focused all their firepower on Zara while carefully avoiding Jake. It was a tactical choice designed to force him into an impossible decision. Jake watched in horror as energy blasts struck Zara's defensive shields. She was skilled enough to defend herself for a while, but the 12-to-1 odds would eventually overwhelm even her enhanced reflexes and tactical abilities. "They want me to choose between the mission and saving you," Jake said as he fired at the nearest assault trooper. His bullets bounced harmlessly off the alien armor. "Complete the mission," Zara called out as she ducked behind a shipping container. "Dr. Cain must not be allowed to escape with the research data." Jake saw Cain moving toward the exit on the far side of the warehouse. She carried a briefcase that probably contained all the information the hegemony needed to develop weapons against human-alien partnerships. If she escaped, Earth's future in galactic society would be in serious danger. "I can't leave you," Jake shouted back. "You must," Zara replied. "This is what duty requires." But Jake had learned something important during their time together. Sometimes duty wasn't about following orders or completing missions. Sometimes it was about protecting the people who mattered to you, even when logic said it was the wrong choice. "No," he said firmly, "we're partners. That means we succeed together or we fail together." Instead of chasing Cain, Jake ran toward the assault troops who were attacking Zara. His police training had taught him that sometimes the best way to help someone was to create a distraction that forced the enemy to divide their attention. "Human Jake, your tactical decision is illogical," Zara said as she saw him approaching the battle. "Maybe," Jake replied as he dove behind cover near her position. but it's the right thing to do. The assault troops adjusted their strategy to account for Jake's interference. Now they had to split their fire between two targets, which gave Zara the opening she needed to go on the offensive. "Your species continues to surprise me," she said as her four arms worked in coordination to return fire. Catherians are taught that mission success justifies any sacrifice. But you choose loyalty over logic? Jake reloaded his weapon and tried to think of a way to even the odds. His bullets couldn't penetrate the alien armor, but maybe he could find another way to help. The warehouse was full of stolen alien weapons, and he had no idea what most of them did. "Can you teach me to use any of these alien guns?" he asked. "The plasma rifle beside you has simple controls," Zara replied while ducking another energy blast. "Blue button activates, red button fires, yellow button adjusts power level." Jake grabbed the alien weapon and was surprised by how light it felt in his hands. The controls were exactly where Zara had said they would be. He pressed the blue button and felt the weapon hum to life. His first shot went wide and melted a hole in the warehouse wall. His second shot struck one of the assault troopers and sent the enemy flying backward. The alien armor that had been immune to bullets offered no protection against its own technology. "Excellent adaptation," Zara said with what sounded like pride in her voice. "Your species learns new combat techniques faster than any other in the galaxy." Working together, they began to turn the tide of battle. Jake's unpredictable human tactics combined with Zara's tactical precision proved more effective than either of them could have been alone. The assault troops had trained to counter standard partnership methods, but they hadn't prepared for Jake's improvised approach to alien warfare. As the last assault trooper fell, Jake heard the sound of ship engines starting up outside the warehouse. Cain was escaping in some kind of transport vessel. "We failed," Jake said. "She got away with the research data." But Zara was examining something on her wrist scanner with all four arms working simultaneously. "Perhaps not. One have been transmitting everything we discovered to Galactic Integration Unit Headquarters. Commander Hayes now has complete intelligence on Cain's research and the hegemony's plans." Jake realized that his partner had been thinking several steps ahead while he was focused on the immediate danger. "You were recording the whole time?" "Standard Catherian protocol for deep cover operations," Zara replied. "But I also transmitted your tactical decisions and partnership responses. The Galactic Council has been monitoring human-alien partnerships to evaluate Earth's potential for full membership." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "You mean this whole thing was a test?" "Not the criminal activity or the danger," Zara said. "Those were real threats that required real solutions. But the Council needed to see if humans could truly integrate with galactic society, or if you would always prioritize your own species." Jake thought about all the decisions he had made during their partnership. He had chosen to trust Zara to fight beside her and ultimately to save her instead of completing the mission in the traditional sense. "Did I pass?" he asked. Zara's silver eyes seemed to glow with something that might have been amusement. "You chose loyalty over duty and partnership over protocol. You made me care about individual survival more than mission success. These choices prove that humans possess something the galaxy has never seen before." Jake waited for her to continue. "The ability to change others simply by being yourselves," she said. "You make aliens want to be better than their programming allows. This is either humanity's greatest strength or its most dangerous weapon." As they walked out of the warehouse together, Jake realized that their partnership had done more than solve a criminal case. It had proven that humans and aliens could work together as equals rather than just as tools using each other for mutual benefit. "So what happens now?" Jake asked. "Now we return to headquarters and await our next assignment," Zara replied. "The galaxy is full of criminals who think they understand human-alien partnerships. It will be interesting to prove them wrong." Jake smiled as their ship lifted off from Europa station. He had found something he never expected in the depths of space. Not just a partner he could trust with his life, but proof that humans had a place among the stars that went beyond being useful tools for more advanced species The future was uncertain, but it no longer seemed frightening. As long as humans could form bonds that transcended the boundaries between species, they would never be alone in the universe.